Welcome to the Real Life Buyer podcast. In this podcast, you will hear interviews with business owners, entrepreneurs, thought leaders, authors, and technical specialists in their field. These professionals will hasten your development, accelerate your career, and broaden your business know-how. Now, introducing your host, Dave Barr, interviewing with a purchasing twist.
Hello, and welcome to the Real Life Buyer. How can a nervous system specialist, somatic trauma therapist, and business coach help business leaders and career professionals increase their success and wealth? I have a special guest for you today, joining me all the way from Australia. Sheridan Ruth is no stranger to trauma. She has faced down a number of life-changing events and combined those experiences with developing her knowledge and expertise to become a personal coach to assist people achieve their goals. Her body-based business way offers an alternative path to those well-trodden and shared guru-based self-improvement practices we regularly see in social media feeds. Today, I want to learn more about what Sheridan does and how she may help us achieve our aspirations other systems and methods may have failed to achieve. So without further ado, I welcome Sheridan onto the podcast. Hi, Sheridan.
Hi, Dave. Thank you so much for having me. And hi, everyone who's listening. Yeah, if you were like, what were those questions? We're going to get all those words. We're going to get into that, I promise. And if you're familiar with it, also excited to have you here. Yeah.
Brilliant. Obviously, there's a lot of technical terminology in your titles, if nothing else. So I've shared a few highlights of your professional expertise, but you have a powerful story. I'd love to hear more about that. And if you could give a little bit of context and background of how you came to be who and where you are today, and explain a little more about what these technical terms are and how you kind of do your thing.
Yeah, thank you. I think, if I'm really explaining it properly, it all goes back to I was a child. I was probably about 7 years old, and it was a rainy day. And I went, just like so many of us, to go and get my hair cut. And I'm sitting in the chair. The hairdresser is kind of cutting things around. And I had this big, beautiful, beautiful long hair. Everyone was so obsessed with it, so thick and all this really beautiful. And I feel these cold fingers on my scalp. And it felt weird and it felt different. I was like, oh, I hadn't felt that before. And the hairdresser kind of scurries and gets people around, and they're all looking at my head. And it turns out I have alopecia areata, which is an autoimmune hair loss that is incurable. There's no cure. And that, I think it did two things for me. Number one, it instilled inside of me a lot of self-doubt and a pretty low self-esteem. But it also opened me up at a really young age to understanding how difficult life can be. And so I developed this really big kind of care for other people and desire to support other people. And then I grew up in Australia, and my family always really valued like volunteering and all that stuff. And so I entered into the nonprofit sector. I studied community development. I did a lot of grassroots. I founded a foundation that continues in operation that empowers women. Figured out a lot of work in that, but not a lot of money. And I ended up working in finance, in commercial mortgage brokering. And because of certain decisions that I'd made due to having such a low self-esteem, I ended up in a really difficult place. I was in an abusive relationship. I left it. He committed suicide, and it was like a telenovela. It was insane. So there's all this tragedy that kind of came. And I was in this place where I was seeing many different things. Number one, how I was in this workplace, very typical finance, mortgage brokers, and a lot of yelling in the office.
Okay.
A lot of yelling in the office. And it was pretty disempowering. It's a very toxic work environment. And number two, I'm working in grassroots still. The foundation's continuing. And I'm seeing all of this inequality and just difficult lives, Number three, I'm seeing how I'm in pain. And I'm just seeing, okay, so when we have all of this pain inside, we do shitty things to other people. And it was kind of fueled by this that I ended up in, I was doing like all of the mental health stuff and the therapy and all of the things that you're supposed to do and talking about it. And I was struggling with my anxiety, but I was really trying my best and nothing was working. And so I remember there was one night I was doing yoga and I was kind of like working through, and I realized that the only thing that had kind of helped me feel better was when I was moving my body. And I would feel kind of emotion come up, or I would, when you're like out going for a walk, you kind of get this insight, you just feel better. And I was like, there has to be something about this, because talking about this stuff or thinking about it isn't helping me, but there's something in my body that there's something working. And honestly, it was like divine desperation and a very good Google search. And I found somatic trauma therapy, which is just essentially how we cultivate a sense of wellness by understanding how our body always is trying to protect us based on the way that it perceives the world. And when we can help the body feel safe, it can be more creative, it can solve better, more important problems, such as how do I stop yelling at everybody in my work? And how do I also write a better deal? Or how do I make a better acquisition? But also, how do I contribute to my community in ways that are valuable so that we can have bigger things? And I just really became to see this. And I think it kind of fell into place. I was doing yoga therapy. I was asked to do coaching. I was asked to do consulting. And it was very much a situation where other people saw in me skills that I was struggling to see. And then at one point I convinced myself, oh yeah, I am actually quite good at this whole coaching thing. I took it online, and that's how the body-based business methodology was born.
Wow. Certainly at a young age to have that kind of difficult situation, particularly perhaps for a girl who takes a lot of pride in her appearance and, trying to emulate perhaps other ladies or mum and so forth. That must have been very challenging. I certainly can relate to the trauma side of that. The first 17 years of my life, I suffered a very extensive stammer. I couldn't say a sentence without stuttering over my words. So you can imagine I suspect you had a similar thing, the challenges when you're at school, when other children just latch onto that kind of problem. And of course, you just face it day in and day out. So I get where you come from, and I know how difficult that must have been. But you've clearly overcome those things, and that's wonderful to hear. And now you're helping everybody else. And that is such an important thing in the world, I think. It makes you feel really good when you're helping others. I get a kick out of it myself as well. So thank you for sharing that. Must have been a tough journey. So well done. Now, how can we help our audience? So we've got a pretty fast-paced business world at the moment. Lots of stuff going on around the world. Quite a bit of stress. Certainly there's challenges financially for many families in the UK at the moment. I'd love to understand a little bit more about understanding and regulating the nervous system can enhance something like cognitive function, how the brain works, those kind of decision-making abilities that we're all faced with every single day, and how you and what you do can sort of translate this into tangible business outcomes. So how on earth do you do that kind of thing? What's the tips and expertise that you can share today on that?
Yeah, that's a good question. Okay, so I think the first thing that we have to do is we have to acknowledge that there are a lot of, like you said, everything is fast moving, but I would like to kind of say there's a lot of constraints, right? The economy over the past couple of, honestly, just like decade, I think that we're at a place where it's not behaving in the way that it has historically. And so everybody has all of these different opinions about what to expect over the coming years, or what we should be doing with interest rates and what's happening with inflation. And then we have all of these discussions around unemployment and what's happening in the market. And we also have access to social media and AI, which has completely changed the economy. So we have these constraints. I like to think of them as they're constraints, and they're different, they're uncertain, and they can feel very tense. Like, okay, my budget is XYZ, but I have to achieve this specific result, and I haven't done that before. The body perceives that particularly as stress. It can put the body into a feeling of I'm not safe. No matter how much you've got your plan in your head and you're smart and you know what's going on, your body can perceive that as something that threatens your resources, your identity, and your sense of belonging. So resources is like, I might lose money, I might lose my house, My identity is, I probably identify with, we all identify with our success in a certain way, or of being renowned for a certain thing. And if all of a sudden we can't provide that or perform in that way, then that's really threatening to who we are, which is very scary for our psyche and our nervous system. Or your sense of belonging. There is inside of all of us that younger part of us that's like, well, if I don't speak a certain way, or if I don't look a certain way, or if I don't make a certain amount of money, or if I don't do the certain thing, then people won't love me. And if I'm not, and the nervous system thinks, well, if I'm not loved, then they'll kick me out of the tribe, and then I'll die. So that's happening right now. And everyone's nervous systems is every time we go to work, every time we open our email, every time we look at the news, your nervous system is trying to answer that question. Am I loved? And am I safe? Are my resources protected? So we can understand that. And what's happening inside of your body when it perceives that stress, which we are having more of now, especially as we're always connected, is it puts the energy in the body into a stress response. And that might be a sympathetic response. So it's activating, which means that it makes your heart beat faster. It makes your mind like move quicker. It makes you want to get up and down. It makes you like, you have all of this kind of buzzing energy. You want to get stuff done. You want to send an email. You're going to call this person. You're going to go for a walk. You're going to do this thing. Or you're going to completely avoid all of that and put all that energy into cleaning the garage, but we have energy. Or the body will say, the threat is too big. I'm not capable enough. My best bet for survival is playing dead and doing nothing. So I'm just going to watch TV. I'm not going to do anything. I'm not going to send those emails. I'm going to hide over here where no one can see me. And I'm going to watch TV, and I'm going to do like all of those random little tools on my to-do list that don't actually have any result. I'm just going to do all of those because I feel good about myself, but I'm hiding from the threat. And putting energy into doing these things, which means it's not putting energy into being creative. It's not putting energy into connecting with other people because it feels threatened by others. It's like I have to protect myself, which means I can't let people in. It's not putting energy into relationships. It's not putting energy into being creative. It's not putting energy into getting out there. It's not putting energy into nothing. I have a client, his name is David, and he works in a startup, and he was at that point where the investors were like, okay, if you don't reach profitability in the next 6 months, we're not investing in another round. Like this is kind of it. And he had put so much of himself into it. And he came to me because he was noticing that like that tense energy was stopping him from actually connecting with his team and motivating them because they're very connection based. When we were able to focus on regulating, what happened was that now he showed up to the calls. He connects with his teams. Okay, like how are you actually? And that helps them feel safe. So now when they're looking at how to get to those goals, whether it's just keeping people on the app or knowing what to purchase or what not to, they're creative because their bodies don't have to protect from each other. They get to be creative. They get to be innovative. And the budget hasn't changed. The company has the same amount of resources. So there's actually the same amount of stress. But because they can say, okay, I'm safe enough, now we get to be in that fun problem solving place. And he gets to speak to his investors. And he's like, okay, I had the courage to just call my investors and just say hello. And they were like, why are you calling me? You normally just call me when you want something. No, I genuinely just thought like we could have a chat. Like, how are you? And that's like, I think long term, we're not there yet, but I think long term that's going to help in the next fundraising of like that connection and the creativity. And now we're providing results. We're not just protecting ourselves from a perceived threat that may not even be real.
That's quite interesting. I certainly relate to a number of things you mentioned there. Certainly the increased heart rate. Certainly for me, when I feel quite stressed, it more occurs in the nighttime when all your body is calm and you wake up in the middle of the night at 2:00 in the morning and you feel your heart racing. And then you start thinking about the challenges, the issues, you perhaps overthink about many things. And you mentioned about people going into the garage. For me, that is great therapy, is to go and clean my car or clean my motorbikes. It sort of grounds me a bit. So it's quite interesting, some of the things you're mentioning there, how to cope with things and the mechanisms to cope. Now, my next question is about chronic stress, because certainly I'm seeing more business owners, people who are doing startups, who are trying to make the new way in the world where they've been perhaps made redundant. They're not happy with their lives. They're starting a new business venture, talking about funding. They need support. They need orders in an intense period of time. And they're trying to battle their way through the myriad of networking meetings that you attend and everything else, and then do these lovely 30 to 60-second pitches. And they're pretty stressed out about all these things. And that kind of hinders both their productivity and their growth, because they're just in this whirlpool of stress and trying to get things done, but not particularly well, etc. Now, something I'm quite interested in that you refer to as somatic strategies. I'm not quite sure what that means. I'd like to know more. And I certainly like to know not only just what they are, but how can these strategies help in mitigating the effects of this chronic stress, the things we just mentioned and talked about? Are there kind of practical steps that certainly new business owners particularly, but even those that have been in the game for quite a while, how could they integrate those into their daily routines? I think it's important, a daily routine. If you just do it once in a while, I don't think it has a lasting impact. And you're just back to where you were a week or two later and you think, oh, I'll have a go at doing this. A bit like exercise. You don't do it every day, you're never going to get fit. So how can you do that? What are somatic strategies and how they can help us? That'd be great to hear.
Let's continue with your metaphor or analogy, is that the right word? With exercise. So first of all, somatic essentially means using the intelligence of the body. So soma is kind of different definitions in different places, but it means the body. And when we refer to somatic strategies, what we're talking about is accessing the innate intelligence inside of your body that is kind of self-healing. It's that same intelligence you have where if you were to graze your arm, if you were to keep it in a nice environment and you don't pick it and you don't like put something disgusting on it, you clean it and you just leave it, it will heal, right?
Right.
Your nervous system has that capacity. And we can liken it to an exercise. The way that we do fulfilling work or anything that provokes any type of well-being or like pleasure in the body, you feel endorphins when you go exercise, you go into a slightly dysregulated state. And we feel fulfilled in our work when we push ourselves and we exert ourselves and we go into a slightly stressful experience. And then we get to the other side, we're like, oh, that was really satisfying. What's important is that we're exerting, we're stressing, and then we're relaxing. Just like we can't always go to the gym and work out really hard every day. So our nervous system needs the same. We need those levels of like deep, deep, deep rest. I think, and this is something that you can take away, Dave, is that if you're waking up in the middle of the night, you're neglecting that state of ease during the day. And so your body is waiting until you're very restful, probably around like a sleep cycle. And then it's saying, okay, great. So now that you ignored me all day, here's all the emotions and the thoughts that I wanted you to feel because they're important.
Oh, wow.
Now that you've relaxed a little, here's all that stuff.
Right. It's almost like it opens the floodgates when you get to a certain point in your sleep cycle then. Okay.
Well, ideally, it doesn't have to. When we're working from regulation, which is what I would encourage everyone going forward to do this, is it's like if you ignore your body all day, it will speak to you when your barriers go down at night.
Right. Okay. That makes sense.
So you have to come back and stop ignoring it.
Because you battle on, don't you? No matter what's going on the day, you just carry on and carry on. You know, you keep working for longer and longer hours quite often. So yeah, that makes sense. You suddenly relax and yeah, then it hits you, I guess.
Yeah. And I have a PDF that I'll provide that will be helpful, and it will go into detail around the nervous system and really tangible ways to regulate that are going to be different based on, like, you experience more of a sympathetic heart rate up. There are going to be other people who tend towards more of that, like, I can't do it. It's hopeless. I can't. I think in this space, the people who experience that more don't get as far. So statistically, we're more of we get anxious and we get activated just because in some level that has helped create success. So there's like a couple of things where we need to be aware that and look for ways that we can continue to have the same kind of output that is creating our success, but we're doing it from a soft place. And we're like, okay, checking in after that meeting, should I just go for a quick walk just to feel the feelings, think the things, go and clean one part of the garage just to allow the body to process that meeting. Okay, cool. Now I'm ready for the next meeting. And it's also other things like listening to the body, which means, and it's so basic, eat 3 meals a day. Try not to have too much coffee. When you're tired, rest.
You crazy?
I know,
Live without coffee?
insane.
Really?
I know, but it actually, that's part of regulation. Are you drinking enough electrolytes? Are you eating well? If being in a car for too long makes you feel unsettled, go for a walk after, or take a few deep breaths, or just kind of like shake it out. Or if looking at your phone makes you feel tense, do less video calls and more just audio. Feel into these. And then there's fancy ways to do it. We can do special breath work and all that stuff. And there's that fancy stuff. And I could speak about this a little bit more. And there actually is probably one thing that I will say that I think is differentiating between what I encourage and provide and teach versus other people who just focus on the superficial. So I'll leave it there. And when you're ready for that next part, you can tell me.
Okay. So I'm trying to process this myself now. So let's say you've had a pretty intense meeting. The important thing is to not just go to the next meeting and the next meeting. Take a bit of time out, as you say, to process what's happened, get your head straight, perhaps take a quick 5-minute walk around the block. I quite like the idea of, taking your shoes and socks off and earthing yourself in a little garden area for 5 minutes. Just give yourself a bit of a break, allow yourself to calm down. And by doing that on a regular basis throughout the day, you say eating well and regularly, should we say as well, those things can help to de-stress you during the day. So at night time, when you wake up in the middle of the night, certainly at my age, the sort of thing guys do, should we say, you don't automatically go into start processing what has happened. Did I do this right? Did I say that right? Have I done this activity? Or what have I forgotten to write down? Those things diminish because you've been dealing with it throughout the day. Would I be kind of right in saying those things?
100%. Yes.
Get it. I get it.
Your body will trust you to, and if those are the questions that you ask, I would encourage you to, take away from the computer, go for a walk. And what did I love about that? I love this. What would I do differently? I would do that differently. Okay. Write down all my action items and move forward. And like actually creating a little bit of a ritual, a transition ritual that becomes automatic.
Yeah, that's great, because we have a tendency, certainly with our calendars, to fill them completely, don't we? We don't take or actively put in a 15-minute break between meetings. It's bang, 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 meeting after meeting. You've got to do this, you've got to do that. You never take the time out. And people see a gap in your diary. Oh, do they love to fill it as well? So you've got to almost block out very small periods of time to recharge, reset, and then you can go back into things. Yeah, that's really good. That's some great advice there. Now, we all love to hear about stories. I certainly do, and I can relate more to stories. You've obviously worked extensively with many individuals. I'd love to hear some examples, 1 or 2, if you could, real-world examples where your nervous system-focused intervention, should we say, and that's led to a significant increase in your clients' business success and income. Aren't we all striving for that? So what lessons can you share today on your experience? Have you got some real examples you can share?
I think it would be helpful. I feel like we've addressed more of that activating and like I feel activated. I think maybe, or we're feeling like high stress and it's making us anxious. Maybe we would speak about, I had a client who came in, and if we were to describe how she was feeling, she was a co-founder and she had a lot of experience in sales. And that was kind of her position, was, to do the pitch decks and to bring on the I would say kind of like sales to individuals who needed the service, as well as like larger corporations. They kind of had both funnels. And, that's a big job. And she also in a startup space. And I think heavy was the energy that her entire company was feeling and she was feeling. This was the 3rd startup that she had founded. the past two had failed. Statistically, that is what happens.
Yep.
But she'd noticed that sales had kind of reached this plateau, and they were trying to expand into the New Zealand market, actually. And they had reached this plateau, and they're like, we don't know how to move forward. And she was feeling that same stuckness inside. And on one hand, it was hard for her because she had this kind of advice of like, yeah, that's fine. Like you're profitable. Like it's fine. Just stick with it. But there was that drive inside of her. I was like, yeah, but we can do better.
Okay.
And we want to do better when we've said that we would. And what we found, we went in and we actually that feeling of stuck energy. So we used kind of like a somatic therapy on her. And we kind of like, okay, how does it feel in your body? And what is it trying to say to you? And real interesting because in order to expand into the New Zealand market, she needed to be really, really creative. They needed to do something different. They had another competitor there, so they had to stand out. And they were feeling stuck because she wasn't in touch with like her instinct and her creativity. And you know that like that fire you feel inside of you where you're like, this is the right decision. It doesn't make any sense, but I know that it's right.
Yep.
She'd been playing by the book so far. And so the business had been playing by the book so far. They needed creativity. And so we kind of get in touch with this thing inside of her body and we kind of, ask some questions around it. And what we learn is that there's this part of her that had this really good idea about how they would do this specific marketing campaign. But it was like this little whisper, and it was actually afraid to kind of speak up. And it was just like this instinct inside of her, but it was afraid to speak up because this other heavier energy was essentially just every single time that she had tried to be creative and somebody said, no, that's a bad idea. That doesn't make sense. It was her first boss. She began as a journalist and was like, oh, no, that's not a good story. We can't run it. And then it was actually her partner who was like, oh, don't be silly. That's a silly idea.
Right.
And she had just kind of begun to doubt that little instinct inside of her. Thankfully, she had the courage inside to say, okay, you know what? Nothing else has worked. I'm going to present this idea to the team and we're going to see where we go. And it did two things. They trialed it out here in Australia and they trialed it out in New Zealand. And New Zealand still hasn't fully gotten to the numbers that they want. It's been about 8 months since they launched, but they've launched in the country. And I think here in Australia, it was maybe like 150% increase in profit.
Wow.
It's not like something that they were expecting, that they were happy. I think that most importantly, they got past that plateau.
Right. Cool. 150%. That sounds good.
Around about, I would have to ask, but yeah.
Yeah. Great. Now that's interesting because that seems to me that people apply logic to a number of decisions. Entrepreneurs are more gut driven, I feel. They believe in something. And quite often when you apply logic, and certainly other people, it sounds, were applying logic to her, saying, no, that doesn't make sense to me, because they're applying their logical brain. But it was the emotional intelligence, should we say, so it leads really nicely onto my next question, that said, hold on a minute, now I feel deep down this is the right thing to do. And so she kind of went down that route and pushed that route a little bit more and almost forgot the logic and said, no, I feel this is the right thing to do. And so let's try it. Would that be a fair summary?
Yeah, I think so. And I think most importantly is that when she was able to disentangle herself from that heavy feeling, which is what we can do through these somatic therapies, she found the confidence to stand up against their opinions.
Yeah. No, that's really good, because we do get very influenced by the people we respect. And if somebody that you respect says, I don't think that's right, quite often you'll dismiss that idea and move forwards rather than stick with your gut and say, I hear what you say, but I'm going to try this if nothing else.
Which is also what I feel most founders and entrepreneurs, we get to in the beginning, we get to the success that we have because we follow that gut. And then it's almost like a little bit later on with other people's opinions around us, sometimes we can lose track of that instinct.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, that leads brilliantly onto emotional intelligence. And certainly in the context of leadership, where I'm thinking about this, it's emotional intelligence is becoming, I find, more cited as a key factor for success. It's not necessarily, the statistical way that your intelligence works. Emotional intelligence is quite a different element. So in the things that you do, how can that influence and boost your emotional intelligence? What sort of practices do you suggest people can do to boost that skill, boost that competence? Because I understand emotional intelligence can be learnt and developed. So what kind of things can you do to really help us get in contact with that area and boost its ability for us?
I'm really happy that we ended up rescheduling this, because if you had asked me this question last week, I would have had a pretty generic answer. On Monday, I did a kind of like a workshop, and it's the basic workshop that I have of like understanding how your nervous system impacts the decisions that you make in business settings, particularly relating to money. And I was like, we've got this thing called somatic intelligence inside of us, and it's like, it kind of like gives us the impact, that instinct, and we can access it in this way. And guys were like, oh, so it's like the new emotional intelligence. And I was like, it is. It's like it's the new emotional intelligence, because emotional intelligence, when our nervous system is regulated, it's very innate. We can understand other people. Because we connect with them, and I feel like I don't have to pretend to be someone I'm not. I don't have to think about what I'm going to say when I respond to you. I'm actually like really truly connecting with you. I can be curious about your experience. Okay, so you see it like that? Oh, I didn't realize that. It can be slow when I interact. I can look at that person in the eye. I can really learn from them, and they can learn from me, and we share. And on a nervous system perspective, there's a communication happening that's automatic. Oh, you're a safe person. I'm a safe person. I can open up. We can learn. When we're regulated, that emotional intelligence, it's not even a conversation. It's just natural. But I think that the number one way that I would encourage people to get in contact with somatic intelligence, which is body-based intelligence, which gives you access to emotional intelligence, but it also gives you access to your instinct, is through something that we call introspection. So it's the ability to read what is happening on the inside of your body.
Right. Okay.
And we can cultivate this skill by finding what's happening on the inside of our body. And so the practice then becomes, if we were to wrap this all up in a nice little bow for the listeners based on the conversations we had, the practice then becomes, okay, I finished the call. What are 3 things I'm feeling on the inside of my body? I'm going to do mine right now. I'm actually a little bit hungry. I feel the breath in the back of my lungs, which tells me that I'm feeling grounded. And I feel like maybe buzzing sensation in my head, which tells me that this conversation is interesting to me. And if we do that consistently, the voice inside, the instinct inside will speak to us more. We'll be more regulated, we'll connect more with others, and we'll be more creative, more innovative, and do fun things.
Right. That's fascinating how you looked in yourself, but you translated a feeling into something that you could share verbally. Now I'm trying to think, would I associate the buzzing in my head with something that says that I'm enjoying the conversation? That's something I would never have considered. That's quite an interesting point you made. There.
I've been practicing this for over a decade. So.
Yeah, that's right. I've never thought that you have to translate your feelings as well. I've never even considered that. I never reflected inwardly to say, okay, what does this feeling mean to me? How do I interpret that? So that's really made me kind of question, how on earth, it's like a different language. How on earth do you get that?
It is a different language. And it's just what you said. It's 2 questions. What am I feeling? What does that mean to me? And it's a language that you will learn in your body, and it will be totally different to mine. Your buzzing in your head might mean something totally different. It's a language. Yeah.
Wow. Yes, that's something I've never considered. So thanks for that. I'm going to have to reflect on that after this podcast now and try and figure my what's going on in me. So that's really great. Now, I'm conscious of the time. I want you to share where the audience can find more about you and your teachings. I think it's important that they can study this a little bit more in depth. So where would they go? What social channels are there, for example?
Yeah, thank you. So I think the simplest place to go is www.sheridanruth.com. If you're interested in the nervous system PDF so that you can understand the nervous system more and gain access to really simple practices that you can use without much privacy, without much time, without much space to regulate. Definitely go to www.sheridanruth.com/regulate. Essentially, if you put Sheridan Ruth into Google, there is one of me, you will find me.
Brilliant. I understand you've got other channels like Facebook and Instagram and YouTube.
Yeah.
And you've also got, should we say, fantastic, your own podcast, which certainly you've had in the past.
I do have my own podcast, and you are about to be the first person I tell about the new brand. I'm launching a book. It should be out in March. And so the podcast has gone through a rebrand to kind of match up a little bit more with the book's intention. And the podcast is called Sustainable Success. So you can Google that and you will find Sustainable Success.
Brilliant. Well, congratulations on the book. I admire people who have the tenacity and ability to write a book. Please, when you do publish that, share the imagery of the book with me, and I'm going to make sure everybody can get to see that. I'll put it on my social media, and hopefully that will encourage people to obviously buy a copy, download a copy, or whatever it's going to be. So brilliant. Yay. Congratulations. One final question. I did some research, obviously trying to get my head around what you do. And I stumbled across a couple of names, a couple of doctors that are kind of neuroscientists and such. One was Dr. Andrew Huberman, and another guy that jumped out was a guy called Dr. David Perlmutter, kind of neurologists, that kind of stuff. I was intrigued to know which experts have influenced you the most, and what would you say sets you apart from the other experts in your field?
Okay. Two good questions. Dr. Huberman is wonderful, but his podcasts are a little bit long for me, but really great if you want to get into the scientist. If you're curious about it, you absolutely need to Google Dr. Stephen Porges, who is really the founder of the theory of nervous system regulation that we're operating from. It's polyvagal theory. It's blown up. And that's probably the best place I would recommend. The other is Dr. Bessel van der Kolk, and he wrote the book, The Body Keeps Score, which is a really wonderful book that tells in very scientific yet easy to understand way, how is it that the body holds and processes everything that's happened in our life and everything that happened to our ancestors. And what does that mean for our life today? I think that if anyone is curious in the fundamentals of this work, The Body Keeps the Score is the best book to practice, to work with. And what makes me different? What makes me different is that we're bringing it together with business. In my awareness, there's absolutely nobody out there who is saying, okay, here's what the nervous system is doing in your personal life. And here is how it applies to the decisions that you're making. Here's how it applies to how you lead your team. Here's how it applies to how you relate to your money, how you feel when you're in between the meetings. It's like we have people who are doing business work. We have people who are doing therapeutic or holistic or wellness or health work, but there's nobody. I get to bring both of the world together.
Right. Sounds like
I help you bridge it.
Yeah, you've got an only statement there, something that when I've spoken to another guest, a chap called Roy Osing, and he advocates the only statement. So you are the only person who, and I think that's brilliant. That helps to set you apart from everybody else. I think that's an important one for yourself. I am the only blah, blah, blah. That's a really interesting point. And combining it with business as well, what you do with business obviously is your expertise, and you need to express that. Everybody needs to know you are the only one. So that's brilliant.
Yeah, I am. Thanks. I almost sound a little bit
please
arrogant.
Share that with me.
I am.
Share me your only statement. I would love to put that out as well.
I will. Thank you.
Super. Well, thanks very much for a most enjoyable podcast. It's been great talking to you, and I wish you all the success for the future.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Thanks for listening, guys.
Take care. So there's another Real Life Buyer podcast. I do hope you enjoyed it, and it has given you some ideas and inspiration for greater action and achievement. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss out on future episodes, and a 5-star review would be most appreciated. If you would like to discover more about me and what I do, take a look at www.thereallifebuyer.co.uk. Bye.